Bitcoin's short supply, facts, future, and fairness. Intro. Bitcoin, often dubbed digital gold, has been making headlines again. By mid-2025, it hit a record high above $118,000, underlining just how far it's come from mere pennies in its early days. A big reason for this massive value? Bitcoin is in short supply, by design. Unlike traditional money that governments can print at will, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins. This built-in scarcity has huge implications for the present and future of finance. In today's deep dive, we're going to explore Bitcoin's limited supply and answer some burning questions in a fun, conversational way. Why is Bitcoin in short supply? How much Bitcoin is left? What happens when Bitcoin's supply gets really low? Can Bitcoin run out anytime soon? What would a world on a Bitcoin standard look like? Is that even possible? And what makes Bitcoin fair compared to regular banks? We'll mix in some current prices and news, a bit of timeless Bitcoin education, and even a dash of humor and vision for the future. Grab a snack, hopefully not paid for with 10,000 BTC, and let's jump in. Chapter 1. Why is Bitcoin in short supply? Bitcoin is intentionally scarce. In fact, scarcity is the feature, not a bug. When Bitcoin's mysterious creator or creators, Satoshi Nakamoto, designed the protocol, they set a hard cap of 21 million Bitcoins. This means that once 21 million BTC have been created or mined, no more new Bitcoins can ever be made. Compare that to traditional currencies. Governments and central banks can print dollars, euros, or yen in unlimited quantities, and boy do they. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is like the universe's rarest collectible. Think of Willy Wonka's golden tickets, but in digital form and with financial value. So why did Satoshi make Bitcoin's supply limited? The main idea was to create a form of money that can't be debased by inflation. By keeping supply in check, Bitcoin was envisioned as a deflationary asset, similar to gold, which is scarce and hard to mine. In theory, if demand for Bitcoin grows but supply remains tight, it puts upward pressure on price. This scarcity is one reason investors sometimes refer to Bitcoin as digital gold. The latest price surge, with BTC soaring past 118,000, has in part been attributed to this fear of missing out on a finite asset. People know there's not enough Bitcoin for everyone to own lots of it, and that built-in shortage tends to make Bitcoin more appealing the more people learn about it. Another factor, most Bitcoins are already spoken for. Bitcoin started in 2009, and miners have been chipping away at its supply ever since. As of 2025, over 93 to 94% of all Bitcoins are already mined. Think about that. Only roughly 6 to 7% of the coins remain to be created in the future. That means Bitcoin's new supply is getting tinier each year. We'll talk about how that works in a moment. It's like if a candy factory announced it will produce fewer and fewer candies each year, and then stop forever. People would start hoarding the existing candies. In Bitcoin's case, high demand and a fixed dwindling supply equals short supply in the market. And here's a twist. The true supply is even smaller than 21 million. How so? Well, people lose things. And Bitcoin is no exception. If someone loses access to their Bitcoin wallet, forgot the password, threw away the hard drive, you name it, those Bitcoins are effectively gone forever. Studies estimate that 3 to 4 million Bitcoin or more are lost permanently due to forgotten passwords, misplaced devices, or other mishaps. Even Bitcoin's creator never spent their stash. About 1 million Bitcoin sitting untouched, presumed lost or inaccessible. These lost coins mean the real circulating supply might be closer to approximate 17 million or even less. So when we say Bitcoin is in short supply, we're not kidding. The coins available for use are fewer than everyone thinks. In short, Bitcoin is scarce by design. A fixed cap, slowing issuance, and even accidental losses all contribute to a shrinking pool of available Bitcoin. Scarcity tends to breed value, which is exactly what we see as Bitcoin matures. No wonder people are scrambling to get even a fraction of a Bitcoin these days. Chapter 2. How much Bitcoin is left? With so much buzz about limited supply, you might wonder how much Bitcoin is still out there to be mined or obtained. Let's break it down. Total supply cap, 21 million BTC. That's the absolute maximum that can ever exist. We'll never hit 22 million, 50 million, or infinity. The code simply won't allow it. Mined so far. Approximately 19.8 million BTC have been mined and are in circulation by mid-2025. That's an astonishing 94% of the total supply already unlocked. Essentially, nearly all Bitcoins that will ever exist are already on the ledger. They're spread across millions of wallets, some held by long-term hodlers, some actively trading, and yes, some lost as mentioned earlier. Left to mine. Subtracting the mined coins from the max cap, we have roughly 1.2 million BTC left that haven't been created yet. These will slowly be mined over the coming years all the way up to 2140, more on that date soon. In percentage terms, only about 6% of Bitcoin's supply remains to be released into the world. That's not a lot. It's like knowing that 94% of all the gold on Earth has already been dug up. The gold rush is largely over. Now, not all of that 1.2 million BTC will appear overnight. Bitcoin releases new coins on a predictable schedule. Every 10 minutes, miners find a block and earn a reward in BTC. However, that reward keeps shrinking over time thanks to an event called the halving. Every 4 years or so, the amount of new BTC minted in each block is cut in half. When Bitcoin started, miners got 50 BTC per block, then it halved to 25, then 12.5, 6.25, and as of the latest halving, which happened in 2024, miners now get just 3.125 BTC per block. This means new Bitcoins are coming out at a snail's pace compared to a decade ago. Let's put that in daily terms. Right now, about 450 new BTC are mined each day globally. That's it. At today's prices, 450 BTC is a lot of money, but in terms of supply, it's a tiny drip feeding into a vast ocean of demand. As halvings continue, that daily number will drop further, to 225 per day after the next halving in 2028, and so on. By 2035, 99% of all BTC will have been mined, leaving just some loose change, in Bitcoin terms, to be mined over the following century. So if you feel like Bitcoins are getting harder to come by, you're absolutely right. The faucet is running dry. What about how much is left in another sense? If we consider how many Bitcoins are left available, not lost or locked away long-term, that's even scarcer. As mentioned, a few million BTC are likely gone forever, and a large portion of the rest are being hoarded by investors who have no plans to sell anytime soon. So the amount of Bitcoin actually circulating on exchanges or in transactions at any given moment is only a fraction of that 19.8 million. This is why sometimes we see sudden price jumps. There are simply not many coins being actively traded, so a big buyer can cause a supply shock. For example, news of large institutional buys, like investment funds or companies adding Bitcoin to their treasury, often send the price upward because it means fewer coins left on the market. To sum up, about 19.8 million BTC exist now, 1.2 million more to come in the future, and effectively even less than that is really accessible. Each passing day, the Bitcoin pie gets closer to fully baked, and it's not a very big pie to start with. 21 million slices for the whole world is tiny. If divided evenly among 8 billion people, that's only 0.002625 BTC each, about 1/4% of a Bitcoin per person. Chapter 3. What happens when Bitcoin's supply gets low? Alright, so Bitcoin is scarce and getting scarcer. What happens as we approach the end of the supply or when new supply becomes really low? Several things theoretically. 1. Increased scarcity equals upward price pressure usually. Economics 101. If supply is limited and demand keeps growing, the price tends to rise. As Bitcoin's supply flow diminishes, especially after each halving, many enthusiasts predict a supply crunch that could drive prices higher. We've already seen some of this dynamic. In the year after the 2024 halving, Bitcoin's price surged to new highs. Some call it a supply shock. Suddenly, the market gets 50% fewer new Bitcoins each day, so buyers compete over the existing pool. If interest in Bitcoin continues, each halving could make BTC feel even more scarce, potentially boosting its value. Of course, markets are complex and volatility is wild, but historically Bitcoin's low supply narrative has been bullish for price. As one crypto pundit joked, Bitcoin isn't scarce, it's super scarce, and that tends to make people a bit crazy for it. 2. Miners rely more on fees. When supply gets very low, it means miners aren't earning much from block rewards anymore. Fast forward to, say, the year 2035, 99% of BTC is mined, and the block reward has dwindled to a tiny amount. By 2140, the reward will effectively be zero. So how will miners, the folks running the powerful computers that secure the network, stay incentivized? The answer? Transaction fees. Even today, whenever you send a Bitcoin transaction, you usually include a small fee to reward miners. In a future with almost no new BTC being created, miners will earn most of their income from these fees paid by users. In theory, if Bitcoin usage is high, people will be willing to pay fees to get their transactions through, and miners will happily collect those instead of block rewards. There's a bit of debate on whether fees alone will be enough to maintain a robust mining network. But so far, the trend is that as block rewards shrink, the ecosystem adapts. Fees may rise, and mining costs adjust accordingly. The Bitcoin network also has a clever trick called the difficulty adjustment. If some miners drop out because rewards are low, the network makes mining easier automatically, so the remaining miners get a proportionally bigger slice of the pie. In essence, Bitcoin self-corrects to keep itself running even as supply issuance drops. 3. Greater stability, and possibly volatility, paradoxically. As we approach a low-supply regime, Bitcoin could mature into a more stable asset, or it could become more volatile due to thin supply. How can it be both? On one hand, once nearly all coins are out, Bitcoin might trade more like a stable commodity. Its inflation rate will be virtually zero, so it's not constantly being diluted. That could instill confidence and make it behave like a stable store of value. Imagine if in 50 years, Bitcoin is as widely accepted as gold. Its price might stabilize as markets get very deep. On the other hand, low supply can mean fewer coins available on exchanges, which today has often led to sharp price swings when big buyers or sellers enter. We might see scenarios where liquidity, coins actively for sale, is low, causing increased price volatility. Think of it like a rare art piece. If only a few exist, the auction prices can swing wildly, depending on who's bidding. 4. Concentration of holdings. Over time, as more people hold Bitcoin long-term and fewer new coins come in, a lot of Bitcoin could end up sitting idle in long-term vaults. In fact, a significant portion is already held by long-term investors who rarely sell. Some call them whales if they have huge amounts, or just resolute hodlers. If supply is low and concentrated in strong hands, markets might get a bit funky. A handful of big players could influence availability, though the market is global and runs 24/7, so it's hard for any one actor to completely control it. The hopeful view is that over decades, Bitcoin's ownership will actually spread out as more people adopt it, even if early adopters have a big head start. But it's something to watch. A world where supply is low and tightly held could see crazy price jumps if, say, a nation-state or mega-corporation suddenly decides to acquire a lot. 5. Harder than gold, narrative. With new supply almost negligible, Bitcoin will have achieved what gold takes nature eons to do, a truly fixed supply. Gold supply grows a 1.5 to 2% a year from mining. Bitcoins will grow 0% after 2140 and effectively near zero by late 2030s. Some predict that as this reality sets in, Bitcoin will be treated as the ultimate inflation hedge, a kind of financial rock that can't be eroded. Already, as Bitcoin's issuance slowed after multiple halvings, more people started comparing it to gold and even calling it hard money. For everyday folks, that could mean if you own some Bitcoin, you know your share of the total pie won't be diluted. It's kind of comforting, like joining an exclusive club that no one else can dilute by making new membership cards. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this breakdown so far and learning something new about Bitcoin, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out and keeps you in the loop for more fun, insightful content. And best of all, smashing that like costs you 0 BTC yep free. Now back to our Bitcoin supply adventure. Chapter 4. Can Bitcoin run out in the near future? Hearing all this talk of limited supply, you might worry, whoa, is Bitcoin going to run out soon? Like no Bitcoins left to mine or buy? Don't panic. The short answer is no. Bitcoin isn't going to run out anytime soon, especially not in the way you might think. Let's clarify a bit. Bitcoin running out could mean a couple of things. One interpretation is running out of new Bitcoins to mine, reaching that 21 million cap. Yes, eventually the creation of new Bitcoins will cease, but that moment is projected to happen around the year 2140. That's over a century away. Unless you've got a cryogenic chamber or a time machine, you and I won't be around for that. The process is extremely gradual. As noted, about 1.2 million BTC are left to be mined, and the rate of mining gets slower every 4 years due to halvings. By 2030, almost 98% will be mined. By 2035, our 99% mined, but that last 1% stretches over a long time because the block rewards become tiny fractions of a BTC towards the end. In fact, miners in the year 2100 will be getting rewards in satoshis, tiny subunits of BTC, that make 3.125 BTC look huge. So Bitcoin isn't going to suddenly hit 21 million and sputter out. It's more like an asymptotic approach, always getting closer but never quite exceeding the cap. Another interpretation of run out might be, could we run out of Bitcoins to go around? Like, could there be none available to buy because everyone's holding tightly? Practically speaking, Bitcoin will always be divisible and tradable. Each Bitcoin is divisible into 100 million units called satoshis. So even if one day one BTC is astronomically valuable and no one wants to sell a full coin, people can always trade in small fractions. The network won't seize up just because the supply isn't growing. You can own 0.001 BTC or 0.000001 BTC and still transact. So we won't run out of Bitcoins for people to use. They'll just get divided into smaller pieces as needed. What about availability in the market? Could we run into a situation where liquidity dries up because hodlers refuse to sell? In the near future, that's unlikely on a scale that stops the market. There's always some price at which people are enticed to sell. If Bitcoin became ridiculously scarce in circulation, the price would likely skyrocket until some holders do sell to take profits or because they need the money. Markets find a way. It's a bit like asking if gold could run out. We're not mining much new gold, but gold is constantly being traded. Sometimes it's in tight supply for industry or jewelry, but price adjusts accordingly. In summary, no, Bitcoin won't run out in the near future. The creation of new BTC will continue very slowly for the next 115 years. And even when that stops, Bitcoin as a system can keep on ticking with the 21 million, or actually a bit less, considering lost coins, in existence. Those coins will keep changing hands, hopefully more efficiently on lightning-fast networks by then. So you don't have to rush as if Bitcoin will disappear tomorrow. Though if you ask some Bitcoin enthusiasts, they might joke that at the rate people are buying, the available supply feels like it's disappearing. But that's just the market dynamics at work. Fun fact here, by the time the last Bitcoin is mined in 2140, many of us will have great-great-grandkids. It really puts into perspective how forward-thinking Bitcoin's design is. It's operating on a timeline longer than a human lifespan, which is pretty mind-boggling for a financial system. Talk about long-term planning. Chapter 5, A World on the Bitcoin Standard, Possible or Not? Now let's indulge our imaginations. What if the world ran on Bitcoin as the standard currency? What would a Bitcoin-dominated world look like, with people and governments using BTC as the main medium of exchange? And is that even possible? Or just a crypto nerd fantasy? First, this idea often goes by the name hyper-Bitcoinization, or adopting a Bitcoin standard, a nod to the old gold standard. It means Bitcoin would be the primary way we measure and exchange value, globally. In a Bitcoin world, you wouldn't be thinking in dollars or euros. Prices might be listed in BTC or more likely in satoshis, because one whole BTC would be enormous for daily stuff. Like, your coffee might cost 0.0005 BTC. People might receive salaries, pay for groceries, and settle debts in Bitcoin. Governments and banks, rather than dealing in fiat currency between each other, might transfer Bitcoin for international trade, or hold BTC in their treasury reserves as a reserve currency. Does that sound far-fetched? Possibly, but pieces of this vision are already peeking into reality. For example, El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender in 2021, meaning you can use BTC to pay in shops or even pay taxes there. It's a small country, but it set a precedent. A few other nations and regions have been flirting with the idea too. By 2025, the conversation has heated up. We've seen hints of larger governments getting interested. In the US, there was talk of establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve, basically treating Bitcoin like digital gold in a government vault. In our current timeline, the US president even floated the idea of a virtual Fort Knox for Bitcoin. That's something hardly anyone imagined a few years ago. Some financial firms are also pushing this forward. For instance, in 2024, the first US Bitcoin ETF was approved, making it easier for big institutions and even governments to indirectly hold BTC. And companies like Tesla, MicroStrategy, and others have already put Bitcoin on their balance sheets, in effect using it as a reserve asset. If Bitcoin became the standard, the financial landscape would shift dramatically. Here are a few hallmarks of a Bitcoinized world. No money printing. Governments couldn't just decide to issue more currency to fund projects or bailouts. The money supply is fixed. This could enforce fiscal discipline. No more trillions magically conjured up. But it also means governments lose a key tool they use today for managing economies. Some argue that's good, prevents abuse and hyperinflation. Others say it's dangerous. What about emergencies when you need more money supply? It's a trade-off. Deflationary economics. With a fixed or slowly growing money supply, the natural state might be gentle deflation, meaning your money gains value over time as productivity increases. Imagine a world where a loaf of bread costs 0.0001 BTC today, and maybe 0.00009 BTC next year, because technology made bread making more efficient. That's opposite to the inflation most of us are used to, where our money buys less each year. Some economists worry that deflation could discourage spending. Why buy now if it's cheaper later? But Bitcoiners often argue that a predictable slight deflation is healthy and encourages saving and long-term thinking. Universal currency. Exchanging money globally would be much easier. No exchange rates or currency conversions. If everyone's on Bitcoin, sending money from Brazil to Japan is as simple as sending an email, just with proper security steps. This could boost global trade and remittances significantly. People wouldn't have to trust another country's currency or worry about their local currency collapsing. They'd all be using a neutral global currency. It's a bit utopian, but appealing in concept. Financial inclusion. Because Bitcoin runs on the internet and doesn't require permission to use, anyone with a simple phone could participate in global finance. In a Bitcoin standard scenario, the unbanked populations of the world could effectively leapfrog traditional banks and use Bitcoin for storing and transferring value. Already, in places with unstable national currencies, think high inflation countries, some people have turned to Bitcoin as an alternative to hold their savings. In a future standard, that could be the norm. People choose a currency that isn't controlled by any single government. Government and banking role. If Bitcoin is the main exchange medium, banks and governments would have to adapt. Banks might focus more on services like custody, securely holding your keys if you don't want that responsibility, or offering Bitcoin-denominated loans. Yes, you could borrow BTC to buy a house, potentially. Governments, lacking control over the money printer, might have to rely on taxation and bonds strictly for revenue, without central banks manipulating interest rates as easily. It's hard to predict how that plays out. Some governments might thrive under hard money, others might struggle to adjust. Geopolitically, a Bitcoin standard could redistribute economic power. For instance, countries that adopt it early or accumulate BTC might gain influence, whereas those that stick to inflating fiat might see their currencies devalue against Bitcoin. Now, is this even possible? There's healthy skepticism. Bitcoin's price volatility is a big hurdle. For a currency standard, you generally want stability. It's hard to run an economy if the currency's purchasing power swings 20% in a month. Advocates believe that if Bitcoin's market cap becomes big enough, say, rivaling global money supply, the volatility would naturally dampen. A $10 trillion asset doesn't double or halve in a week as easily as a $1 trillion one. Additionally, widespread use might stabilize demand, but it's not guaranteed. Even gold, while more stable, can fluctuate. There's also the political factor. Governments may resist giving up their own currencies and the power that comes with them. We might see a scenario where Bitcoin becomes a global reserve asset like a digital gold standard, rather than the only daily currency. For example, central banks could hold Bitcoin to settle balances between each other, even if citizens still use local currencies for convenience. Perhaps even currencies backed by or pegged to Bitcoin. This partial Bitcoin standard might be more feasible in the medium term. Imagine a day where your USD, Euro, or JPY is backed by BTC in a vault, the way dollars used to be backed by gold. It's not totally impossible. Some fintech companies are already offering stablecoins that are kind of like that, though most stablecoins today are pegged to dollars, not Bitcoin. In a fully Bitcoin standard world, everyday life might not look too drastically different for the average person using their phone to pay, except that the unit of account has changed. You'd have a Bitcoin wallet instead of a bank account. You might see prices like coffee, 0.0003 BTC on the menu, and you might chuckle with nostalgia about how things used to cost $5 or $10. Financial crises due to currency collapses might be a thing of the past, but other kinds of challenges would replace them, like ensuring the security of everyone's digital money, or handling the transition period where not everyone has adopted BTC yet. One thing's for sure, the conversation has shifted from Bitcoin could never be taken seriously by governments to, hey, some governments are already using or considering Bitcoin. That doesn't mean the whole world will go full Bitcoin standard next year. Very unlikely. But step by step, it's edging into the mainstream. Whether it stops at being a respected asset like gold or goes all the way to global currency, we'll have to wait and see. But it's a heck of a scenario to think about. Part financial revolution, part sci-fi. Chapter 6. What makes Bitcoin fair compared to banks? Bitcoin and banks talk about an odd couple. One is a decentralized digital network run by code and consensus. The other is an age-old institution with vaults and ledgers run by people. So, what do Bitcoin fans mean when they say Bitcoin is fair or fairer than the traditional banking system? Let's break down a few key aspects of fairness. 1. Equal rules for everyone. Bitcoin's monetary system has the same rules for all participants. The supply schedule, 21 million cap, having every 4 years, etc., is transparent and applies to everyone. No central authority can suddenly decide to create more Bitcoins on a whim or change the inflation rate because it suits them. With traditional fiat money, central banks, often influenced by governments or political pressures, can print money, which might benefit some groups, say big banks or those close to new money creation, at the expense of others. Your savings lose value due to inflation. Bitcoin's fixed supply means no secret inflation tax eating away your purchasing power. That's inherently a fairer deal for anyone who holds BTC. 2. Decentralization equals no favorites. The Bitcoin network doesn't care if you're a billionaire or a student with $50 worth of crypto. When you broadcast a transaction, it's processed in the same way, for the same fees, under the same rules as anyone else's transaction. There's no gatekeeper saying, we'll give priority to this VIP customer, or we'll deny service to that person because we don't like them. In the banking world, unfortunately, not everyone is treated equally. Banks might refuse customers, impose higher fees or minimum balances on those with less money, or simply be inaccessible. Imagine trying to open a bank account as a refugee or in a country with unstable governance. Can be very hard. Bitcoin is permissionless. Anyone with an internet connection can receive, hold, and send Bitcoin. You don't need approval from a bank manager or a government. That's a radically different level of financial inclusion, arguably much fairer. especially for the unbanked and underbanked populations who are often left out of the traditional system. 3. Transparency and verification. Ever try to find out what exactly your bank is doing with your money or how many dollars are in circulation? Good luck! That information is often opaque or hard to parse. With Bitcoin, every single transaction and the entire supply count are public on the blockchain, albeit pseudonymous. Anyone can run a Bitcoin node and verify the total supply, the issuance rate, and the rules being followed. You don't have to trust a bank's internal ledger or a Federal Reserve statement. You can literally check the math yourself. It's hard for any funny business to happen behind the scenes. No hidden loans creating new money out of thin air. No off-balance sheet shenanigans. Looking at you, 2008 financial crisis. This transparency is a form of fairness. A common citizen can audit the system as easily as a large corporation can. In contrast, try auditing the Fed. Not so straightforward. 4. No discrimination or censorship. Banks and payment processors can and do censor or block transactions. They might freeze accounts, reverse payments, or ban customers for various reasons. Sometimes those reasons are understandable, fraud, illegal activity. But other times, people get caught in bureaucratic limbo or political crossfire. Bitcoin is neutral. The network itself doesn't discriminate. If you have the Bitcoins and you know the recipient's address, your transaction will go through as long as you pay the tiny fee and follow the protocol rules. There's no central authority that says, "Nope, we won't allow you to send money to this person or country." Of course, laws still apply at the human level, and exchanges can blacklist addresses, etc., but the core protocol treats everyone's transaction equally. That's a fair playing field. The only thing that matters is the math, not your identity or status. 5. Personal control. Be your own bank. With Bitcoin, you have the option to be your own bank. This means you can hold your funds in your own wallet, secured by private keys, and not rely on an institution to safeguard or permission your access. In the traditional system, your money in the bank is kind of the bank's IOU to you. If the bank has an issue, say it collapses or faces a freeze, your access to funds can vanish or be delayed. Remember stories of bank runs or people in troubled economies unable to withdraw their own cash. Bitcoin gives you sovereignty over your money. That's empowering, and many argue more fair because it shifts responsibility and power to the individual. Of course, with great power comes great responsibility. If you lose your Bitcoin keys, there's no help desk to call, but the point is, you have the choice. Financial freedom is a facet of fairness. You're not subject to someone else's rules or errors to use your money. 6. Consistent policy. No surprise changes. Ever wake up to news that your central bank suddenly changed interest rates or enacted capital controls? Traditional systems can change the rules on you with little warning, like freezing conversions, changing withdrawal limits, or printing trillions which dilute value. Bitcoin's rules are predictable and change only with broad consensus. Any major change to Bitcoin, like increasing supply, which is practically impossible in practice, would require overwhelming agreement across the network's participants, millions of people globally. In short, no single actor can pull a fast one. The fairness here is in predictability and stability of the rules. People can plan for the future, knowing the monetary policy is set in stone, or rather in code. 7. Fair access to marketplace. Think about how you start accepting payments as an individual or small business. With banks and credit cards, you might need approvals, pay sizable fees, and face chargeback risks. With Bitcoin, you can accept payments from anyone, anywhere, instantly by just generating a QR code or address. No merchant account required. That lowers the barrier for entrepreneurs and creators worldwide to participate in commerce. It's as easy to sell as it is to buy. This symmetry, as the Bitcoin Wiki once put it, it's as easy for you to sell things as it is to buy them, hints at a more level playing field, where big retailers and a person selling crafts out of their garage use the same network and face the same conditions. To illustrate fairness with a bit of humor, banks are like that strict club bouncer, checking your ID, deciding if you're allowed in, maybe charging a cover fee. and definitely closing the doors at an arbitrary hour. Bitcoin is like an open 24/7 diner, where everyone's welcome as long as you follow a few basic no shirt, no shoes, no service rules. In Bitcoin's case, the rule is basically no invalid transactions. The diner doesn't care who you are. If you've got the money to pay for your meal, you get served. No VIP line, no prejudices. Now, this isn't to say Bitcoin is perfect, or that the current distribution of Bitcoins is super fair. Early adopters naturally got a larger slice by being there first. There are valid critiques that a lot of Bitcoin is held by a relatively small number of addresses. Some of those are exchanges holding for many users, but still. However, over time Bitcoin has been spreading out, and anyone can still buy in even if it's just a few sats. The key difference is the system itself strives to be fair and neutral. It doesn't guarantee equal outcomes. People who bought Bitcoin at $100 obviously have more gains than someone buying at $100, but it guarantees equal opportunity to use a sound form of money. And that's something that has attracted many to Bitcoin, especially in an era when trust in banks can be low. Remember, Bitcoin was born in the ashes of the 2008 financial crisis. The very first Bitcoin block contained a headline about bank bailouts. It was a statement on creating a fairer alternative. In conclusion on this point, Bitcoin's fairness comes from its trustworthy rules, open access, and neutral stance. It doesn't care who you are. It treats everyone's money equally, big or small. In a world where traditional finance can sometimes feel rigged to benefit insiders, that's a refreshing idea. It's like financial justice baked into code. Fun fact: the $500 million hard drive hunt. In 2013, a British man named James Howells accidentally threw away a hard drive containing 8,000 BTC, which he had mined back in the early days of Bitcoin. At today's prices, over $116,000 US per BTC, that stash would be worth more than $900 million. Realizing his mistake too late, James has spent years petitioning his local city council in Newport, Wales, begging for permission to excavate the landfill where he believes the drive is buried. So far, they've said no, citing environmental concerns. Moral of the story? Always back up your seed phrase, and maybe don't store millions in Bitcoin on a laptop in your sock drawer. Quote, "We have elected to put our money and faith in a mathematical framework that is free of politics and human error." Tyler Winklevoss.